My name is Eleanor Briggs, and I've lived in this house for 41 years. Every creak in the floorboards, every chip in the paint, every smell of morning coffee, it all carries my husband's laughter, my son's first words, my mother's last Christmas. That morning, the sunlight came through the kitchen window in that familiar slant, the one that always made the old lace curtains glow like candlelight. I remember thinking how peaceful it looked until I saw the trash can. The lid was half open, and there, on top of coffee grounds and orange peels, lay my mother's quilt, the one she stitched by hand when I was 20, folded once, tossed aside. For a second, I didn't even understand what I was seeing. Then I saw the blue wedding plate beside it, the one with a gold rim and a small crack from the night my husband, Arthur, dropped it while washing dishes. We laughed about that for years. He's been gone almost a decade now, but his laugh still echoes in these walls. I reached down without thinking. The quilt was damp, heavy with coffee stains. I pulled it out anyway. Behind me, I heard her voice. "Mom, what are you doing? Those are filthy. We're getting rid of old stuff. I'm giving the place a fresh look." That was my daughter-in-law, Kayla, 33. Polite in front of others, brisk when it's just us. Her phone was in her hand, the kind of casual cruelty that comes with not even realizing you're breaking something sacred. I didn't yell. I didn't even turn around. I just said quietly, "These things aren't trash." Kayla sighed, like she was dealing with a stubborn child. "They're outdated, Eleanor. It's time to move on." I could taste metal in my mouth, anger, disbelief, grief all tangled together. The house felt different in that moment. Not mine anymore. I rinsed the plate under running water, watched the brown swirl fade down the drain. Then I said, mostly to myself, "Moving on doesn't mean erasing." She didn't answer. She was already walking away. I held that plate like it was breathing, and I realized something I hadn't before. You can lose your home long before you ever move out of it. After that morning, the house began to feel unfamiliar in ways I couldn't explain. It wasn't that Kayla was cruel, she was polite enough, but every corner I loved seemed to lose a little of itself each day. The first thing to go were the lace curtains in the kitchen. They'd hung there since 1987, yellowed by sun and time, soft as old paper. Arthur and I had found them at a flea market. He'd said they made the light look like it remembered something. One day, I came downstairs and they were gone, replaced by gray blackout panels that shut the morning out completely. When I asked about them, Kayla smiled without looking up from her phone. "Oh, those. They were full of dust. Mom, I ordered new ones, better for the baby's sleep schedule." The baby. Everything was for the baby. For someone who hadn't even arrived yet, that child had already rearranged my entire life. I told myself not to make a scene. Tom was working long hours repairing power lines after the last storm. He came home tired, covered in sawdust and oil, too worn to hear about curtains. Then came the bookshelf, my old mahogany shelf that had survived 2 moves and 3 coats of varnish. Arthur had built it himself, uneven on one side, but sturdy. It used to hold cookbooks, framed photos, and my favorite clock. When I walked into the living room one evening, it was gone. In its place stood a sleek white cabinet with push-click drawers. Kayla saw me staring and said brightly, "Do you love it? It's from IKEA, clean lines, minimalist." "Where's the old one?" I asked. "In the basement," she said, as if that explained everything. I went down later that night to check. It wasn't there. That's when I started counting, one quiet subtraction at a time. My sewing basket vanished. The rocking chair Arthur sanded by hand was replaced by something upholstered in beige. Even the radio he used to fix every Sunday afternoon was missing from the counter. Each absence left a space that no new thing could fill. I wanted to tell Tom, but every time I tried, the words stuck. He'd squeeze my shoulder and say, "She's just nesting, Mom. You know how women get before the baby comes." But I wasn't nesting. I was fading. One evening I came home from the grocery store and saw Kayla standing at the sink, tossing something into a box labeled donation. The clang that followed made my heart drop. It was my cast iron skillet, Arthur's skillet, the one he'd used for pancakes every Sunday for 40 years. It had his fingerprints worn into the handle, a shallow dent on the rim from the year Tom was in high school and dropped it. Kayla looked at me like nothing was wrong. "That pan's too heavy. Nonstick is better now, easier to clean." I walked over and picked it up from the box. The metal was still warm from the stove. "This isn't just a pan," I said quietly. She shrugged. "Then keep it if it means that much." She went back to her phone, scrolling, humming along to some upbeat song. I stood there for a long time, holding the skillet like it might slip away if I blinked. That night, I tried cooking with the new pan. The pancakes stuck. The butter burned. The kitchen smelled like smoke and loss. When I sat down to eat alone, the taste was wrong. The house felt wrong. I looked around at the walls Arthur had painted, the table where Tom had once done homework, the floor that creaked when my mother used to visit. Everything familiar had been polished, scrubbed, or replaced, like someone was trying to erase the fingerprints of time. I ran a hand over the smooth surface of the table. I could still feel the faint grooves Arthur had carved into it with his screwdriver by accident. I traced one of them with my finger and whispered, "You'd hate what's happened to this place. Art." The silence that followed was heavy. That's when I saw the flyer lying on the counter, a bright yellow paper that must have come with the mail. It read, "Kintsugi Workshop, repairing broken things with gold." I almost threw it away. Then I stopped. Maybe that was the word I needed. Repair. Not destroy, not argue, just mend. For the first time in months, a tiny flicker of hope stirred. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep watching my life disappear piece by piece. Something had to change, and this time, I would be the one to start it. The Kintsugi Workshop met on a Saturday afternoon at the community college downtown. I almost didn't go. My hands shook too much these days, but something about the idea of mending things with gold felt like a dare. The instructor was a woman about my age, with kind eyes and hair streaked silver. She said softly, "In Kintsugi, you don't hide the crack. You celebrate it. It's proof that something survived." Those words lodged in my chest. When she poured the golden lacquer into the seam of a broken cup, the shimmer caught the light. For the first time in months, I felt the faint pulse of something I'd been missing. Pride. Pride that what's been broken can still be beautiful. I drove home with the repaired cup beside me on the passenger seat. The sun hit the gold lines just right. It looked alive. Kayla was in the kitchen when I walked in, rearranging the counter again. She looked up, cheerful. "Hey, Mom, I'm clearing space for the baby formula and bottles. Hope that's okay." I smiled, though I felt the old ache return. "Kayla," I said, "can I show you something tonight? It won't take long." She blinked, confused. Sure. "After dinner?" "After dinner?" Tom worked late again, so it was just us. The house was quiet except for the hum of the dishwasher. I climbed the attic stairs first, the steps groaning under my weight. When I pulled the string light, a soft yellow glow spilled across the boxes, stacked neatly against the walls. Kayla hesitated at the top step. "I didn't even know we had all this stuff." "That's the point," I said gently. I brushed dust off a box marked Tom Baby. Inside lay a tiny red sweater, faded but clean. "Your husband wore this his first winter," I said. I didn't have much back then, but I stayed up 3 nights knitting this because it was going to snow. Kayla smiled faintly, but her eyes darted to her phone screen lighting up in her hand. "You can put that away," I said, not unkindly. She hesitated, then slipped it into her pocket. I opened another box labeled Art's Tools. Inside were rusted wrenches, a tape measure, a small radio. The air smelled faintly of motor oil and cedar. Arthur used to fix cars for neighbors who couldn't afford a mechanic. He'd never take a dime for it. Kayla crouched beside me, curious now. "You kept all of this?" "I kept what mattered." I reached for another box, smaller, heavier. I knew what was inside before I lifted the lid, the blue wedding plate. The same one she'd thrown away. I'd cleaned it, filled its crack with gold from the workshop. It gleamed softly in the dim light. Kayla drew in a breath. "You fixed it." I nodded. "It's not perfect, but neither am I. Neither is this family. That's what makes it ours." She stared at the plate like it was something sacred. I didn't understand. "Eleanor, I thought I was helping." The house looked sad. "It looked lived in," I said, my voice steady. "There's a difference." For a long while, neither of us spoke. Dust floated through the air like quiet snow. "Finally," Kayla whispered. "I've been so worried about doing everything right. The nursery, the budget, the photos. I thought if I made everything new, maybe I could finally get it right." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the fear under the polish. Perfection isn't love, dear. It's just noise. You don't have to fix what isn't broken. Her eyes filled with tears. She nodded once, quickly, like she didn't trust her own voice. When we came back down, she stopped by the kitchen and touched the counter gently, as if noticing it for the first time. "Would you teach me?" she asked. "Teach you what?" "How to keep things the right way." I smiled. "Tomorrow morning, I'll show you how to season a skillet." She laughed softly, wiping her eyes. "Deal." That night, after she'd gone to bed, I stood in the kitchen with the golden plate under the lamplight. Its cracks glowed faintly. I thought of what the teacher said, proof that something survived. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. Tomorrow, we'd begin again, not by replacing, but by remembering. The next morning came gray and quiet, with the faint smell of rain drifting through the cracked kitchen window. I was already awake when Kayla came downstairs, barefoot, hair tied back, her phone left somewhere upstairs for once. "I'm ready," she said simply. I didn't ask what she meant. I just took the cast iron skillet down from the shelf where I'd hidden it behind the slow cooker. She wrinkled her nose. "It's heavier than I remember." "That's because it's real," I said, setting it on the stove. "Everything real carries weight." We oiled the pan together, warming it slowly, the way Arthur had shown me. The smell of iron and oil filled the air. It wasn't pleasant, not really, but it was honest. As we waited for the pan to smoke, I told her how Arthur used to hum old Motown songs while cooking pancakes, how he'd tap the spatula against the skillet like a drum. She laughed at that, a little surprised. I didn't know he cooked. Oh, he made a mess of it, but he always tried. When the skillet cooled, she helped me wipe the excess oil away. For a moment, it felt like something small but sacred had been passed between us, a rhythm older than either of us could name. Later that afternoon, she asked to see the attic again. "I want to understand more," she said. We climbed the narrow stairs, each step creaking under our feet. The air smelled like cedar and dust, sunlight breaking through the little round window. I opened a box marked Recipes, Family. Inside was a wooden card box, the edges smooth from years of use. I hadn't opened it in ages. Kayla lifted a card from the top, reading aloud in her careful voice, "Buttermilk pancakes, Sunday special." She smiled. "That sounds familiar." "Arthur's handwriting," I said. "He never measured anything, just a handful of this, a pinch of that." Then she noticed something beneath the divider. "There's another card tucked under here." She pulled it free. The paper yellowed with time. It wasn't a recipe at all. It was a note written in Arthur's rough scrawl. "Elle, if you're reading this, it means you kept the Sunday table alive. Don't let it fade, even when it's quiet. The laughter comes back if you listen." I felt my throat tighten. I'd forgotten he'd ever written it. Maybe I'd hidden it on purpose, afraid of missing him too much. Kayla placed a hand on my arm. "He sounds like he loved this house." He did. He built most of it with his own hands. That's why I couldn't stand to see it disappear piece by piece. She looked around the attic, at the old photos stacked in corners, at Tom's baby shoes, at a clock that hadn't ticked in years. "I get it now," she said quietly. "I thought you were just attached to stuff, but you were holding on to people." "Exactly," I said. "Things don't matter because they're things. They matter because they remember when we can't." We stayed up there until the light began to fade. Kayla kept asking questions: how Arthur proposed, how Tom behaved as a kid, what the first years of marriage were like. Each answer stitched something back together between us. When we came downstairs, she paused at the doorway to the living room. "Can we make a space for this? For all of it?" "What kind of space?" "A shelf, maybe a wall, like a museum of us." The phrase caught me off guard, but it sounded right. The next day, she cleared a section by the dining room window. We cleaned it together. I laid out the quilt, folded neatly. She placed the recipe box in the center. The golden cracked plate went above it, propped upright in a wooden stand. She even printed an old photo of Arthur in his garage and framed it beside them. When Tom got home that evening, he stopped in the doorway, eyes wide. "What's all this?" Kayla smiled nervously. "A memory shelf." He looked from her to me, then back again. "It's nice. Really nice." That night, as we sat down for dinner, the air in the house felt lighter, less tense. The golden seams of the plate caught the soft lamplight, reflecting it across the table. Kayla picked at her food for a moment before saying, "I've spent so long trying to make everything look perfect, but perfect doesn't feel like home. This does." I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You're learning fast." She laughed softly, brushing away a tear. "I guess you're still teaching." "Arthur would be proud," I said. She smiled through the shimmer in her eyes. "Then let's make pancakes this Sunday, the old way." And just like that, the house seemed to exhale, a long, quiet breath of relief. Sunday morning came wrapped in soft light and the smell of coffee. The house was so quiet I could hear the rain sliding off the gutters. I slipped my feet into my slippers and headed downstairs, half expecting the same silence that had filled our breakfasts for months. But Kayla was already there. Her hair was messy, her sweatshirt dusted with flour. The skillet, Arthur's skillet, sat on the stove, gleaming like it had been waiting. She looked up when she heard me. "Don't panic," she said with a crooked smile. "I'm trying pancakes. Real ones." I leaned against the counter, the warmth of the stove reaching my hands. "He'd like that." She grinned, flipping the first pancake. It stuck. She muttered something under her breath and laughed. "Guess I'm not as graceful as your husband was." "Arthur burned the first 5 every Sunday. I said. He called it quality control. She laughed again, brighter this time, and the sound filled the kitchen like sunlight. Tom wandered in, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What's that smell?" Kayla handed him a plate. "Evidence of my courage." He sniffed the air. "You used the old pan." "She showed me how to season it," Kayla said, nodding toward me. "Turns out it still works perfectly." I smiled. "Things usually do, if you give them a little care." We sat at the table together, Arthur's table, scratched and scarred but sturdy. The steam rose from our plates. The baby kicked once inside Kayla's belly, a small reminder of tomorrow. She took a bite, winced, then said, "Not bad for my first try." Tom chuckled. "Dad would have said it needed more butter." "He would have been right," I said, reaching for the dish. For a while, the only sounds were forks scraping and the faint hum of rain outside. It felt right, like something had finally settled back into place. When the plates were empty, Kayla excused herself for a second and came back holding a small box wrapped in tissue paper. She slid it across the table toward me. "What's this?" "Just open it." Inside was a small ceramic bowl. A thin golden seam ran along its side, glimmering under the kitchen light. "I tried kintsugi," she said, cheeks pink. "It's harder than I thought, but I wanted you to have it. I figured we could add it to the shelf." I traced the crack with my finger. The gold felt warm, almost alive. "It's beautiful," I whispered. She hesitated. I kept thinking about how I threw away all those things. I didn't see what they meant. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. Truly." Her voice trembled, and for the first time, she didn't look like a stranger trying to prove herself. She looked like family. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. "You didn't just throw away things, Kayla. You almost threw away our story, but you came back for it, and that's what matters." Her eyes filled. "You really forgive me?" "I do," I said. "Because you listened." Tom reached over, catching both our hands in his. "You two are going to make me cry before the baby even gets here." Kayla laughed through her tears. "You're soft. Admit it." He grinned. "Don't tell the guys at work." The laughter rolled easy between us, steady and warm. After breakfast, Tom went outside to fix the back gate, and Kayla started cleaning the kitchen. I stayed at the table, watching her move around the room that finally looked like home again. She wasn't rushing anymore, wasn't trying to make everything spotless. She hummed softly, one hand resting on her belly. When she was done, she poured us both fresh coffee and sat down. "I was thinking," she said, "maybe we could make this a thing. Sunday breakfast. Every week." Arthur's handwriting flashed through my mind. "Keep the Sunday table alive." "That sounds perfect," I said. We carried the dishes to the sink together. The rhythm of our movements felt easy, practiced. I realized how long it had been since I'd shared a kitchen with someone who wanted to be here, not just pass through. Later that afternoon, the rain stopped. The light slanted through the windows in long gold lines. Kayla asked if we could tidy the memory shelf. We dusted the frames and refolded the quilt. She placed her repaired bowl beside the golden cracked plate, the two pieces glinting side by side. "Look at that," she said softly. "They match. They belong together," I told her, "like scars that met halfway." She smiled. "Maybe that's what family is, just learning how to meet halfway." "Exactly," I said. The door opened and Tom stepped in, smelling of wood and rain. He looked at the shelf, then at us. "That's new." Kayla nodded. "It's our reminder." He tilted his head. "Of what?" She looked at me, waiting. I answered for both of us. "That broken doesn't mean lost." He nodded once, quietly, like he understood more than he could say. As the evening settled, they went upstairs to rest. I stayed behind, making tea. The kettle whistled softly, the sound blending with the creak of the floorboards. I sat at the table again, alone, but not lonely. The golden seams on the plate and the bowl caught the lamplight. They glowed faintly, not flashy, just steady, like faith. I thought about how easily we throw things away, how quickly we label something as finished. A house, a memory, even a person. We forget that repair takes time, that love is a kind of glue stronger than any lacquer. Arthur used to say, home isn't where you live. It's what you remember. I looked around, the skillet drying by the sink, the faint smell of pancakes still in the air, the laughter echoing upstairs. I remember? Art? I whispered, and we kept the Sunday table alive. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds broke open just enough for sunlight to spill across the yard, turning the puddles into tiny mirrors. I watched the light flicker on the gold cracks and realized something I hadn't before. Maybe we aren't meant to stay unbroken. Maybe every fracture is just a place where love found a way back in. The gold in those lines wasn't decoration. It was proof. Proof that what's cared for, what's forgiven, what's loved, survives. And in that small, shining moment, the house felt whole again.